Hello. It's a second line day. We are in gate 16, the gate of skills, gate of enthusiasm, and we're in the second line, which is called the Cynic. So the second line here, it's second lines generally, they don't know themselves. They are lower trigram, they're not aware of what skills they have. They're just hanging out in their room, waiting to be called out, really. And not even that, because they don't know there's anybody who's going to come along and call them out, but that's the mechanic. It's not always comfortable having other people show up and tell you what you're good at, and you really don't always believe it when other people tell you you can do something. There's always a slight element of cynicism there, because other people telling you what you're good at, it can really throw you off what it is that you're doing. It can lead you off on all sorts of paths and adventures. It's not necessarily a bad thing, of course. I'm a second line profile. I speak from experience here, and I have an open G as well. So what can I say? I have a lot of certificates in things that other people thought I was good at. And now I have strategy and authority. Thank you. If you think of the mechanic of the second line, it gets called out. It doesn't get to invite people in. It's the hermit. It often actually doesn't want anybody coming in, to be fair, because they come in and they tell you how skilled you are and how they're going to help you and how your experiment is going to change the world, or your book is going to enlighten everybody who reads it, or whatever it is. And then they don't do anything. They don't follow through. And the result is cynicism, because you've got all excited about that and you've got like, oh, somebody believes in me. They've called me out and they believe in the skills that I have, that I've mastered over all these years, and they disappear. So it's tricky, because with genetic continuity, if you're a second line, you're going to have, probably you've got a second line somewhere. Cynicism is a potential in you. Feel into that. Is that something you feel? Look at where you've got a second line. Is there an element of cynicism in wherever that gate is? We all have everything, of course. We just have some things more consistently than we have others. Some come more to the forefront of our experience than others, but the potential for all of them is there. The lifetime learning here is the sharpness to burst bubbles. So, eventually your cynicism pays off, and you don't allow yourself to get to that point of being really buoyed up by whatever it is, because you are learned enough to pop that and just be okay, now I can see the truth. So the exaltation says the self-reliance and the skill to judge objectively any claim, regardless of rhetoric. The expression of the skill to judge objectively. So these are people who really get to see if there is anybody out there that can be of value to them. This is collective, there are no specific social channels in collectivity, because the whole circuit really is inherently social. It's inherently interactive. It wants to share. So discernment. This is so important for the second line. Ra said it was something essential to teach second line children how to use strategy and authority to recognize the correct call, because of what happens. Especially you've got the 16-2 with their wonderful skills, and somebody steps in and calls them out and says, I want to get you to that point of experimentation, or I want to get that point where you can express or manifest whatever it is that your skill is. And it sounds great. And it's projector gate. It's so nice to be recognized. But if there's no discernment or clarity or correctness, no, it's not going to work right. It will lead to frustration. Not always, of course. There are times when it does work fine, and but we don't know what it would have been like with strategy and authority in those times. We never see that picture. We never see that other side of it. But it's always going into something correctly. At least it gives us that chance, doesn't it? It gives us the opportunity of having the correct experience, whatever that happens to be. The 4816 is a channel. It's projector channel, the channel of talent, and it does need recognition. And this second line actually naturally attracts that. There's a phrase I can't remember where it originated. It might be Walt Whitman or someone like that. But they say it's not the despair that kills you, it's the hope. And this is, I remembered that phrase when I was creating this little presentation, because that's how it feels with the cynicism. Because until you get to that point of being cynical, then you're hopeful, and yeah, it's not. Been there. In the detriment, we have the compulsive cynic, whose very cynicism is a source of enthusiasm. Or you could say whose very cynicism is the source of skills, because both enthusiasm and skills are the names of this hexagram. So you could have objectivity expressed through cynicism. Being a cynic can be a wonderful talent. And through that genetic continuity, all second lines can be great cynics. 64 different variations of cynicism in different guises. Second lines project out that quality of the gate that they're in. So these are people who project out their skill of cynicism. And there are some very, very funny comedians out there whose performances are based on cynicism. Now it'll be fun to look at their charts, and see if they've got this. The ninth gate, grounding this 16 gate of skills. This is called Misery Loves Company. This is the second line here. So they're all alone in their room and they're trying to focus on something, maybe feeling a bit cynical because of the hand that life has dealt them. And the exaltation is saying they need to collaborate with others to temper their frustration. This is the generator gate. So we have the generator keynote here. And it's that thing of cynicism. It can be funny and it can be unpleasant. And this is the collective. They love to share everything. Cynicism or misery, everything is in this together. And as I was going through this line, I remembered that the Rave I Ching, it's written for the not self. Ra said this very clearly. The Rave I Ching is written for the not self. Cynicism is a default. It's a conditioned response to an incorrect call or a false recognition. It's an invitation to become more discerning, really. It's an invitation to watch another layer of that conditioning fall away as we see our conditioned responses to external events. Perhaps we stop taking it personally, and that allows for an expansion. There's nothing wrong with cynicism. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of these expressions because they're a part of our nature. I know, though, for myself, that sometimes I forget about what Ra said about the Rave I Ching, and I rely on the line descriptions, and I use them sort of as an excuse or as a justification somehow for how I'm feeling. I have gate 40 in the line 6, and it's called decapitation. And I saw this tendency in myself so clearly earlier this year when a friend of some years broke up with me for no particular reason. It was part of her process. It was correct for her. Okay. My initial reaction, and it was a reaction, it was very much it was off with her head. This is that 49-6 decapitation, off with her head. She trampled on my loyalty and my channel of community. She broke the bargain. And in many ways, that's true. And certainly that was the unaware expression of Bambaji. I could feel it, and I realized that I didn't have to do that. I could actually let my wave through, watch it, and that whole feeling of the off with her head thing, I realized that that was not very loving to myself. And that is actually what is the most important thing to me. Is this expressing something that shows I love myself, that I've accepted who I am, that I've, that this layer of conditioning that says, no, I'm a bad person and I shouldn't do that and I have to do something else, all of that starting to collapse. And so I found my peace through it. I worked through it. The wave moved on and I didn't hang on to it. The relationship seems to be done, but I don't feel the need to rip her head off anymore. So that's a win. And I just wanted to put that out there, that sometimes, we do look at these lines and we think, oh, this is telling me how I need to behave, but it's a signpost for how the not self expresses. It's just that we live very much in a not self world. And a lot of us are still not self expressions all the time. It's so useful to do that. It's also very useful to put attention on the true self version and maybe start writing those notes out as well. Because Ra did always say that everybody has got their own Ravi Ching inside them. And it's based on their own experience, and it's based on their own deconditioning, and it's all of that, based on their own strategy, authority, conditioning, type, all of that. And it's their own piece of work. So that's something that if you felt invited to do, you could start exploring. Can you write your own version of the Ravi Ching for your true self? And how many versions of it might have to be written before you end up with that perfect version? How many 7-year cycles? This is my Ravi Ching cycle 1, my Ravi Ching cycle 2. Mars is on the move later on today, symbolizing the use of energy. From the early immature way of using this primal life force into something that it's just more mature, it's more focused, it's more responsible. It can be very uncontrolled in its early expression. Yeah. So at 2108, it moves into gate 42. This is the gate of growth. This is the gate of endings, this sacral gate where we find an expansion of resources and the energy for completion. This is a gate in the sensing circuit, and it's all to do with cycles of experience, cycles of growth, cycles of decay. Each cycle seen through to completion builds on prior lessons, and then that collection of experiences creates a foundation. And that foundation then can ensure growth. Waiting for experiences to reach their natural conclusions rather than forcing a premature ending. Because that's the way that we get stuck in a situation, and it comes around and it loops and bites us on the arse another time, and we have to deal with it eventually. Unresolved patterns are never just left hanging around. They might come back in a slightly different guise, but they do come back. So we use our energy correctly, and these lessons get finished, and well, the cycle completes. Perhaps this is that Mars energy, moving through from immaturity to maturity. The moon, currently still in gate 61, that head center gate, the pressure to know the unknowable. And then the focus moves to gate 60 at 1524. And this is the gate of limitation and acceptance. This is a gate in the root center with the fuel and the pressure for the mutation that transcends old forms, old values, and outdated order. And then we have gate 41 at 0114. And this is the gate of contraction, the root again. And it's a gate that tells us to prune back in order for future growth. Interesting that it comes after that gate of growth. This is telling us, okay, now prune some of that growth, and then we can move forward in a more stable way. There can be a quality of fantasy here. It's the fuel for our imaginations and the pressure to desire a new experience. How are these energies landing with you out there in the virtual world? If you have anything you'd like to share, please leave me a message. I do always read and respond to them. And I'm always grateful for your input, for your observations, and they inform my experience. And maybe they'll make their way into my Ravi Ching one day. I wonder, that'd be fun to write something like that, wouldn't it? Maybe we should have a group. Oh, I wonder where that came from. Anyway, I'm done. Thank you for watching, and go gently. Love yourselves. Bye-bye.